It's in the computer!
No!
It is!
Bloody fool! You picked up words! You got words yourself, that's how it works, I told you!
There it is!
Come when I tell you!
As I'm getting older, chip upon my shoulder, blown through life to roll over and die. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
Hey guys, it's Streed, and today I'm going to be reviewing the British 1970s supernatural TV movie chiller, The Stone Tape. The Stone Tape was directed by Peter Sasdy, who directed the fourth installment in the Hammer Dracula series, Taste the Blood of Dracula. The film stars Michael Bryant, Jane Asher, and Ian Cuthbertson. It's about a research team led by Peter Brock, who owns Ryan Electric Products. The team move into a brand new base at Taskerlands, a Victorian abode rumored to be haunted by various entities. He proposes to create a new recording medium to spite his Japanese competitors. A member of the team, Jill Greeley, who has a keen sense for the paranormal, uncovers some supernatural phenomena, and soon the rest of the crew believe her, which leads to Peter attempting to record this phenomena to support his new theory dubbed the Stone Tape Theory, giving the film its namesake. Peter claims that this isn't a haunting nor a ghost, believing that moments of great emotion can be imprinted and echoed into the stone walls. So he utilizes a sundry of ways to record the vibrations of these outre experiences, much to the dismay of his crew. Jill seems to be affected by this haunting the most, since her psychic abilities enable her to witness and hear the wails of the morose soul, Louisa Hanks, who tragically died from falling down a flight of stone stairs in 1890. As the film inches to its eerie conclusion, it builds up an immense tension. It's yet another example of an unfortunately obscure gem that's rarely ever discussed or noticed. The atmosphere is very reminiscent of the short-lived British anthology series Shadows of Fear. The Stone Tape is undeniably an atmosphere piece, a must-watch for anyone with a predilection for unnerving tales of the supernatural variant. This film was introduced to me by my good friend acknowledging our discontent. You see, I was kind of bored in the evening, so he recommended me. I was looking for something atmospheric. I was like, you know what? I'm in the mood for like an atmospheric sort of TV movie. And right away, he recommended I watch The Stone Tape. And I gotta say, I am not disappointed. Now, the film is somewhat flawed, but I think it accomplished what it set out to be. A atmospheric and haunting sort of little TV movie, you know? And as for the strengths, the soundtrack is very eerie, and I think it was very effective in building a sense of forebode, if you know what I mean. But the counter to that is, despite the soundtrack being really effective, I feel like they could have had a little more variations in music. Listen, it does sound very good, but I feel like there could have been more sort of eerie tracks that sort of plays the same sort of music over and over, and it doesn't get too grating. It's just a little more disappointing that they had like such effective music, and they only utilized very little of it, like not like literally, but they used like sort of the same sort of music, if you understand what I mean. And the atmosphere itself, it very much reminded me of the British anthology series, a very obscure British anthology series called Shadows of Fear. And that is such an amazing show. I haven't seen every episode yet, but I recommend anyone watch it. So far, my favorite episode is Sugar and Spice. Now, that is a really engaging and deeply unnerving episode, and just how realistic it is. It's honestly nightmare fuel. But anyways, yeah, it reminded me very much of the atmosphere of Shadows of Fear. It sort of had like that same. It just felt so similar, you know, much like Revenge, the TV movie Revenge, aka Into the Frightened People, which that's such a fucking stupid alternate title. it has that sort of atmosphere to it. And there's also this claustrophobic scenery. Now, this Victorian house, from the outside, it looks gorgeous, but on the inside, it's kind of remodeled to look like more of like a science lab, if you know what I mean. Like there's like long hallways, like with a variety of colors, great usage of shadows and light. And in contrast to that, there's this one room that's really dilapidated and it's full of spam. And apparently it's this place where this woman died. Her name was Louisa Hanks, and she died in 1890 or so. And she's the one that is causing all this paranormal occurrences, if you know what I mean. And the acting is also really incredible. Not all of the characters are memorable, but the acting is so well done. And an example of this is when Jill first discovers she kind of has these premonitions. Is when she first sort of feels the presence of this paranormal being. She flips the fuck out and she runs into the hallway and she's screaming in utter terror. And listen, the effect on the ghost lady, on the effect on Louisa, she doesn't look that great. The effects haven't really aged that well, but it's what sells the fear for me is just how frightened Jill reacts to this. She is absolutely mortified, and honestly, she is the greatest actress in this film, undeniably. The other actors do a fine job, but she sells the fucking film. Honestly. And the characters are also very intriguing. You see, the leader of this sort of science group, this group of dudes, is this dude named Peter Brock, and he's such an asshole. Like from beginning to end, this guy has no likability. He fucking sucks. He practically drives his entire team crazy, being obsessed with trying to prove these paranormal occurrences, which he doesn't even really believe in, like an actual ghost. He's really weird in his beliefs. He feels like it's some sort of a residual thing that's going on with, like, when people die or something. Like it's more of like a natural occurrence. I don't know. They're sort of vague on that, but yeah, he doesn't like genuinely believe in any sort of like actual ghosts. More like some sort of natural thing in the walls or something, which leads to the title, the stone tape. But yeah, he's a little weird on that. But he basically drives his team crazy, and with this loud ass machine that sort of it detects vibrations, and he wants to prove that there's some sort of phenomena going on, even if he doesn't like believe in the ghosts themselves. He believes there's some kind of abnormal phenomenon going on, and he wants to record it. And he practically drives his whole team insane with this. And like they start breaking down, a few guys start crying, and it just goes off the rails. And Jill, she is my favorite character. She's very sensitive. She's emotional, and she actually bears a strong resemblance to my dear mother, which is probably another reason why I felt so connected to her. And she feels deep sympathy for this ghost, for Louisa Hanks, and you as the audience, you sort of kind of side with the spirit too, because these guys are very invasive, they're loud, and sort of like one of the few likable characters really is Jill. And then we have Collinson, who feels kind of uncomfortable with this whole thing, and as the film goes along, he sort of gets more and more pissed off at Peter for being a massive prick. And like I said, you feel sympathetic for Louisa Hanks because she's got to deal with all this shit, and it's like it's just constant barrage of these assholes just mucking about and fucking around, and she died in such a horrible way. And the film actually has a very clever twist. Now, when it starts to drag, sometimes in places in the film it starts to drag, but Jill, this is something that really heightens the movie. Jill discovers from the librarian, he's from the beginning, that the first exorcism in the house dates all the way back to the 1700s, which implies that this paranormal activity didn't start when Louisa died. It possibly caused her death. And that brings me to another thing. There are some... no. I believe it's hinted that besides Louisa, this place is being haunted like demons and such. And I'll go into more detail when I discuss the ending. And there's lots of effective scenes in this film. For instance, they bring in this guy who used to play around in the abandoned house. And he sort of like he broke glass and shit, and he left one of his friends behind who kind of went loony until he got rehabilitated. And they use him for an experiment. They try to catch her on video, if you know what I mean. They try to catch her on video, the ghost lady, Louisa, and he starts freaking out. He sees her, and she starts shrieking, and he reacts in a more frightened way more than Jill when she first discovered this shit. He runs right out. He's panicked, and he's another great actor in the film, even if he's not in it that long. And another great scene is where one of the characters, I forget his name, the Louisa, she starts typing through this typewriter thing, this printer thing, like a few of these words like save, soul, what's the other, pray, something like that. It almost sounds kind of like a warning, which, I mean, once you get to the end, you find out that it pretty much was. And he shouts, and he goes, "It's in the computer!" And another great piece of fine acting for him. And one of the greatest scenes in the episode is Jill's death. One of the greatest scenes in the film is Jill's death. Now, I kind of saw this coming. I saw the ending coming. Even though it's not easily predicted, I kind of predicted it. I don't know, maybe it's because I've seen a shit ton of films. I sort of saw it coming right from the beginning, actually. She sees these ghostly apparitions, but they're not Louisa. They're these really weird gelatinous shadows that are like aggressive shadows, you know. It looks like a light show. There's like flying red circles and weird green gelatinous creatures. It very much reminded me of the shadows seen in the Fraggle Rock episode, The Pebbleplex Blues, when Boober and Wembley entered the Cave of Shadows. That's exactly what it reminded me of. It had a similar atmosphere to that scene, and it looked very similar in style to that scene. And when she gets killed, she ends up walking up the stairs with these apparitions attacking her, and she falls and she dies. And my fucking God, her death stare is terrifying. Like, you could see the residual fear on her face even after death, and it's frightening. It's downright chilling. And even after Jill's death, Peter is a fucking sheer asshole. He destroys her documentation and says, "Oh, we don't need it. She died of insanity, blah, blah, blah." He barely even gives a fuck. So, he ends up, Collinson, go for Collinson, fucking right on, man. He punches the shit out of him, even though it looks kind of silly. He punches the shit out of Peter, and Peter ends up going back to the room, and he hears Jill's voice, and she's like, help me, Peter! And the final shot of the film is zooming in on him, screaming, and there's all this noise, and fucking gives you the chills. As for the weaknesses, like I said, there's some poorly aged effects, specifically the sort of the effects used for the ghosts, which are used sparingly. Luckily, it's not overblown. That's another thing I can praise this film for, is the original. It's not that original, but I feel like it's executed in a very unique way, because the ghosts are, or at least Louisa, she's not really seen as necessarily an evil entity, but a tragic one, because she's practically stuck in this place, reliving her pain until the end of time, until she ends up disappearing, I guess. And it's only when we get the aggressive spirits, which I kind of theorize that are demons. And it's said in the film that it's hinted, really, that these paranormal spirits were responsible for killing Louisa all the way back in the 1890s. And what was I saying? I kind of got lost. What was I saying? Oh, I forgot. Well, another thing is the screaming is kind of repetitive. Like when they go to sort of catalog these abnormal occurrences, the screaming does get a little repetitive. But luckily, it's not too grating. It gets a little grating, but like just when it starts to get grating, they sort of cut it out and move on to something else. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Yeah, the whole film is it's sort of shown in a very unique way, you know, with these. It feels very realistic too, with these scientists sort of researching. There's lots of technobabble, which kind of confuses you. They sort of research what's going on, and it's done in a very realistic fashion, surprisingly for like a supernatural film. And overall, oh yeah, there are a few. My one last criticism is there are a few there are a few scenes that kind of drag on that I didn't really care for. Specifically, the Crawshaw subplot with Peter, sort of his rival is Crawshaw and such. I think I don't know. I didn't really care much for that. But overall, I really enjoyed this. I'm gonna have to rate it a 8 out of 10. So straight. This is a message straight to my good friend, acknowledging our discontent. Thank you very much for introducing me to this film. It was deeply unsettling, very atmospheric. It was haunting, and honestly, I could definitely see myself watching it again in spite of its flaws. Well, guys, that was Streed Reviews, and I will see you all next time.